But yeah, so I did actually have a question about the detail you put into songs and how you make your choices. Because in a song like Ernest Henry Johnson on Different Drum, there's a whole extraordinary life in there. And
Mm.
get the sense of this whole life in a song, which is really hard to achieve. And I know you worked with his granddaughter on the song. So I'm interested in the craft side of it when you're coming to that material and thinking, all right, how am I going to put all of this in this arc? So we have the beginning, middle, and end. And we also have, I think, in your songs, the little arcs within each verse of beginning,
Mm.
middle, and end. And that's a real skill and craft of storytelling. So is it partly instinct at this stage of your career that you know which details to choose?
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I think so. I think it's a 30-year focus and passion into the craft. I also must make mention to Lee Sarich before we progress into this next question. Lee Sarich was a returned veteran who was also played a vital part in that video, Southeast Queensland Sophie. And it would be wrong of me not to mention him and his bravery in coming out on the night when we decided to film that, and just to be present there as a person who identified with suffering PTSD. And his energy, his persona in that video clip, I
Mm.
find the most humbling, but also the most powerful thing that I linked to in that video. Lee Sarich, who did 2 tours in Afghanistan, had been shot, had been blown up, and found himself living out of his car once he returned, and was didn't have the words or the ways to fix himself. So he's focus had become to really heighten the awareness of these veterans suffering PTSD. So it was through his bravery in coming in and exposing himself through that video that also made it so powerful. But to address your last question, look, it's an absolute privilege to be invited into somebody else's world. I love co-writing. I love broadening my world, I
Mm.
suppose. And when somebody invites me into theirs, be they a car fanatic, be they a returned veteran, be they a granddaughter of a man who served in not only the First World War, but the Second World War, and lived through some of the most dramatic, I would say, they're dramatic shifts.
Mm.
You can have slow growths on graphs, and then you can have these incredible column graphs that pop out of nowhere, then drop into an abyss. So you think about that First World War experience, and this young man at the age of 16 trying to run away and enlist and do his part, but then being dragged back home by his mother until he was old enough, then going into the trenches in the Somme and suffering, being blinded by the mustard gas after 2 years of surviving in there, and then to return and then go through, survive the Spanish flu and the great, the roaring 20s and the Great Depression of the 30s, and then to re-enlist for the Second World War, and then find himself at Kokoda.
Mm.
And then what a life, and having a family and having that innate want to serve and keep on serving, serve your children, serve your partner, serve your country, serve your mate. And after he got sent back from Kokoda, after they realised, one of the young officers there remembered him as being one of his bosses in the early days. Said, "Look, mate, you've done your thing. Go back home to Sydney." And he was in Sydney Harbour when the Japanese sub blew the Koorabool up. And so he leaves his post to help those blokes blowing up a boat. And they try to discipline him, and he says, "Well, you know what? Stop this." And he joined the ragtag fleet. And the ragtag fleet's not really discussed, but they were it was a secret navy that the Yanks put together in order to help the wounded who were fighting up in the Coral Sea get back to shore. And he enlisted into that. And so when you get such a dramatic story that you have to try and condense into 5 minutes max,
Mm.
it's a challenge. But some stories you just feel really compelled to tell. And music, like in a musical, you can have a character start in a musical and they'll be this person and everyone's going boo. Then through the course of a song, they can have a transformation of complete character. And by the end of that 4-minute song, they're this person, everyone's going, yay. So something about the magic of music allows time to disappear
Right.
and a metamorphosis to occur, and all of a sudden the caterpillar becomes the butterfly, you know. And it's, I don't know how it works, but yeah, there's, you know, and with him, Ernest Henry Johnson, again, it was very important to relate it back to PTSD and the need for us to support our soldiers once they returned, because there was no PTSD in the 20s after, the First World War, and more men died within the first 10 years of returning than they did over there. And that's something we just don't learn about or discuss.
Hmm.
And it was the same with the Second World War. This whole country's just experienced the reverberations of trauma from so many events. And that goes through the family units. So the trauma of the First World War, into the Depression, into the Second World War, into the Vietnam War, into the trauma just rolls along, let alone what we did with the Indigenous trauma and convict trauma and dislocation trauma. It's incredible that we are finally hitting this stage of our evolution where we're actually starting to slow down and analyze that trauma and work through it so that we don't pass it on to next generations, hopefully. So